got you. Woo! Your safe space. We're talking about UFOs, UAPs, NHI, disclosure. Frickin' poltergeists. Orbs, ghosts, the Loch Ness Monster, Sasquatch, but mainly NHI and disclosure, and everything else your friends, family, and coworkers are so sick and tired of hearing you go on and on about and back. Can't keep a good man down. Hurricane Milton came at me. Straight to my house. Right up my street. And for those of you who haven't been through a hurricane before, let me tell you, it sucks. It's not all hurricane parties and mojitos. That's not. Don't let anybody fool you. It sucks. There's so many things wrong when you have a hurricane. Everything just gets completely screwed up. From at first, everything's fine. And everything's just fine. It's just hot and humid all summer long. And then one day someone's like my wife will come up and she'll be like, hey, did you see the thing about the hurricane? Or the storm? Did you see about the storm? No, what storm? Oh, the thing on the news. There's a storm. Where's the storm? Oh, it's like in Mexico. Okay. I don't think about it. It's in Mexico. It has nothing to do with me. And then suddenly, 2 days later, oh, that storm has a name and it's moving. Another day later, oh, it's like a Category 5 hurricane and it's on its way to you. And then for like a week, 10 days, however long it takes for this gigantic thing, bigger than the state of Texas, it's just rolling your way like a gigantic Godzilla. Everybody on the news for like a straight week is like, you're going to die. Everyone's going to die. You have to leave. You got to get out. If you stay, you'll drown in your home and you'll be left to be found by rescue people weeks later, and the flesh will have rotted from your bones and the fish will be picking at your body. And it's awful. And so then you're like a panicked parent with kids and you're like, well, I don't know what to do. I guess I have to leave. So you leave, you evacuate. If you're lucky enough to have the means to evacuate and a place to go to, you go there, which is what we did. And then the power goes out. We were on the other side of the state waiting out this storm. And the power goes out. Everything in the fridge spoils. You come back home. You have to throw everything away. The house is completely destroyed. Fortunately, our house wasn't destroyed, but it was beat up pretty bad. Throw away $200 worth of groceries or whatever. Then you've got to go buy them again. Buy a generator. That's $1,000 right there. One thing after another. And these expenses just keep stacking up. So I thought I would open today by using this as an opportunity to talk to you about climate change, because climate change is real and it's real as shit and it's a real problem and it's going to affect all of you. And if you're not on board with that, I can't help you people anymore. But it's it's a real problem. And this article just came out. I'm going to share this really quick, and then we'll get into the show. But let me see if I could do this. I have an article to share. It is this one from The Guardian. Earth's vital signs show humanity's future in balance, say climate experts. Record emissions, temperatures, and population mean more scientists are looking into possibility of societal collapse. This has been going on for a while, but you're starting to hear about it more and more now. More and more of the Earth's vital signs have hit record extremes, indicating that the future of humanity hangs in the balance. That's not a very vague statement. That's pretty specific. A group of the world's most senior climate experts have said more and more scientists are now looking into the possibility of societal collapse, says the report, which assessed 35 vital signs in 2023 and found that 25 of them were worse than ever recorded, including carbon dioxide levels and human population. This indicates a critical and unpredictable new phase of the climate crisis, which is what we saw in this hurricane. It was the fastest hurricane to ever become a Category 5, and then it was a Category 4, and then it was a Category 5 again, and then it just maintained this strength right up until it almost rolled over everybody as a Category 5, and then it weakened, thank God, just beforehand. But part of the reason why it gained so much strength so quickly is because the Gulf of Mexico is like a bathtub. It's boiling hot. And that's not okay. That's like jet fuel for hurricanes. So I could tell you that as somebody who resides part of the time in Florida, and I grew up here, this state has never seen as many shitty weather events condensed this close together as in the last few years. And it's really scary. If you live here, it's terrifying because it can wipe you out financially. It can wipe you out personally. It can set you back decades. We have no meaningful social safety net here in the States, particularly not in Florida. So when these things happen, and they happen a lot now, and they're much more powerful than they used to be, and they're much more frequent. Just 2 weeks earlier, we had this enormous flood that flooded out entire neighborhoods. The most rain ever recorded in a single month happened in that month. So it's crazy. Anyway, that's my soapbox. Oh, one other thing, and I think it's important to point this out. Exxon knew all this back in the 60s. This is from the Harvard Gazette. Exxon disputed climate findings for years, but its own internal scientists knew this. This is a matter of public record now. This is out in the open. This is from January 12th, 2023. Research shows that company modeled and predicted global warming with shocking skill and accuracy starting in the 1970s. I'm sorry, it was the 70s, not the 60s. So they've known about this for all this time. And if you're looking for a conspiracy theory, if you really want one, if you want to find one, this is your conspiracy theory. This is the real one. This is the one where the corporations pulling oil out of the ground and making billions and trillions of dollars off of carbon fuels, carbon-based economy. This is a conspiracy where all of those guys got together in a room and decided they were going to lie to you for 40 years, 50 years, 60 years, and just tell you a bunch of bullshit about your carbon footprint, recycling your plastic bags. Meanwhile, the planet was being geoengineered away from anything close to what we could call a livable climate. So now we're dealing with the fallout from that. And that's going to only get worse for the rest of our lives and for your kids' lives and for their kids' lives. So you should be really pissed off about this. It's a real issue. And on that note, welcome, Xander, my co-pilot for today. How you doing, buddy?
Quite a start, Clint.
I was so pissed.
No, you should be. You should be. This is, it's where you live. So definitely it should be taken seriously at the end of the day.
By the way, for people who don't know, and just one last thing, the state of Florida, this is the state of Florida. They outlawed the term climate change. You're not allowed to say it in the government. It's not allowed to be written down. You can't refer to it in a document. You can't put it in a piece of legislation. Climate change doesn't exist. The state government of Florida made that rule. And that was our governor, Ron DeSantis. So these people, they're going to get us all killed. Anyway, that's it. I'm done with the hurricane thing. Welcome to everybody in the chat who's here. We got shout out to our mods, Chris Hovord. Is Brett here? Oh, Chris. Thank you so much for the super thanks. That is awesome. You didn't have to do that. Brett's here. Shadow Patriot Terry. Hi. Ebony McKickass, one of my favorite screen names ever. Johnny J. Shadow Patriot Terry. AG, Avi Z. Welcome, everyone. It's great to have you here. It's great to be back. How's everything on your end, Xander?
Yeah, everything's great. I mean, I've not had any hurricanes to deal with, apart from the whirlwind of raising a 1-year-old, but I don't know if anybody can tell. I've got a little bit of a hoarse voice. I've been dealing with laryngitis the last couple of weeks, and it's purely induced by a little 1-year-old that will not sleep. So, other than that, I mean, it pales in comparison. It pales in comparison to what you've been dealing with the last couple of weeks. Some of the videos you sent me, even yesterday's video of what seemed like a gunfight outside your house, which wasn't a gunfight, thankfully. But
I thought it was the invasion had begun. I heard this sound. I was sitting at my desk and I heard this sound. It sounded like gunshots. It sounded like a bunch of people shooting at each other, like outside the house across the street. And it's like bam, 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 bam. And I'm like, what the fuck is that? I get up and I go outside, and my wife was out in the front yard doing some yard work and stuff. And our neighbor was in her house, and she comes running out of her house, and she looks up, and I look up, and I'm looking for the sound, and I look up at the power lines behind the house are sparking, and like lightning is shooting off of them, and it looks like this whole thing is about to catch on fire and explode. And my neighbor comes running out of her house, and she hits the deck. She's like, call the fire department. And so it was this whole big thing. But yeah, we had like 8 or 9 people came out. The fire department came out. It was a whole thing. This is after they had fixed the power. They had already fixed it from the hurricane. This just happened yesterday again. So then it went out another 2-3 hours or whatever it was, and they had to get it back. So that was exciting. Trying to get caught up this week. We have so much news. I feel like I missed a year's worth of stuff last week. There was the Immaculate Constellation, Lou's interview on Jesse Michaels. What else did I miss? What else happened? The Schellenberger article, drone swarms over American military bases, specifically Langley. Bunch of stuff happened. So I spent the last couple of days getting caught up, and I thought today we could go through some of the bigger stories and just pick them apart a little bit, talk about those, and tease out a few things that are going to be coming up. The first thing was that Chris is going to be streaming the New Paradigm Institute. What is the date and time of this event? I have to pull this up.
So it's on Sunday at, I think it's 3 p.m. Eastern time.
Sunday, 3 p.m. Eastern time. Here it is. Learn, take action. I'm trying to find the actual Global Disclosure Day, October 20th, 2024. Here we go. And we'll be streaming this on the Discord. So if you're not already a member of the Discord and you want to participate in the watch party, Chris is going to be overseeing this and putting this together so we can just kind of watch as a group. Xander and I will be doing an interview at this time, so we won't be able to make it, but we're going to be talking to Dan Golair, the director of the documentary The Discovery, which we teased, what was it, the week before last? We looked at that trailer, and that's going to be a really interesting interview. So that'll be coming up hopefully next week. We'll get that done on Sunday. And let's see, what else? So we've got Dan's interview. We've got NPI Watch Party. We broke 16,500 subs on the channel. Yay us. Go team. 16,509. That happened last week. Super excited about that. We're on the road to 20,000, and then the road to 100,000. So super excited. Thanks to everybody who became a subscriber last week, and also our new members. Quick shout out to our new members. Tana Stocking Firefly, Peter Stogios, Boomerang Style. Oh, Xander, you're a member now. Hey, there you are. Klappa, Salvador Morphin, Michael Wells, welcome. Stephen Daedalus, Frostradamus, License to Chill. Thank you, everyone, for coming on board. It's great to have you. Members are the heart of Team Night Shift. You make it possible for us to do what we do here. For example, I had to pay to go behind the paywall to read Schellenberger's article on Public, and that was a subscription that I had to get. So in addition to all the others, just to maintain this channel, there's like half a dozen subscriptions I have to have so that I can make it happen. So thank you guys scoping the chat here. So, Immaculate Constellation was the big story that the first one I missed last week. Schellenberger's article on Public. Was it Public? Let's see if I've got this pulled up.
Yeah, I got you.
You got it?
Shortly.
Shortly.
This one.
There it is. Yeah. Pentagon is illegally hiding secret UFO program from Congress, whistleblowers allege. This was a really interesting piece because although he's dropping this enormous truth grenade about Immaculate Constellation, he kind of frames it as a government oversight issue, like a congressional oversight and funding issue. As in that we don't really know why Congress was not made aware of this, but they're supposed to be. And that's kind of his opening for all of this. Xander, what did you make of this? What was your thought of the whole Immaculate Constellation release?
So I thought a lot of the meat around the article was actually seemingly sort of talked about outside of the article. So we had Corbell with Knapp. I always forget. It's weaponized. That's what it's called, isn't it? Corbell obviously alludes to the fact that he knew about this a long time ago, and he goes into a little bit of detail about what the program was itself. Schellenberger himself actually appeared on Rogan. I think it was last week sometime, and I didn't. I'm stuck behind the paywall on with the actual article itself, so.
We can peek behind the paywall on my end.
Yeah. So I don't know the specific details that are mentioned in the article, but I've seen what was said on Rogan. I've seen what Corbell has said. So yeah, it seems to me that the flavor is in people's reactions to it rather than the actual article itself. And yeah, let me just you've got the paywall sorted.
Yeah, this is the paywall.
All right, let's get this added in.
There's some really wild shit in here.
So can you go to the section where he actually names the program?
Yeah, that's right.
Oh, here it is. And it's so hard to remember Immaculate Constellation, I think.
You think so?
I find it really hard to remember that name.
It's a good vocal warm-up.
Yeah.
Immaculate Constellation. Unique New York. I'm looking
so what I
for
picked
this.
up in Rogan's podcast was that this is not just a collection and quarantine program, but it's Schellenberger also mentioned that this is a mother program for other SAPs, I imagine. And I imagine those SAPs are also unacknowledged. So, which begs the question, if this is a unacknowledged SAP, what qualifies for a waived unacknowledged SAP, which is like apparently the next level up? Do you know about this?
A waived?
Yeah, so there's
SAP?
a waived unacknowledged SAP. I'll have to try and find some...
I feel like there's too many layers and there's too much subterfuge
probably
within
by design. Probably by design.
What a bureaucracy, and Congress has no information about any of this stuff. And it's like, well, who is actually in charge here? That at the core of it boils down to that for me. It's like, who is running things? Because later they go on and say, well, the executive branch has been overseeing this. And he talks about how this is an executive branch program, but we've also heard that not all presidents are fully briefed in on all this stuff. And then you hear, conflicting claims like, well, Trump knows something, or, Bush knew it all, and Dick Cheney's in charge of the whole thing. And it sounds like they kind of dance around this whole executive office, executive branch issue in different ways, depending on who you talk to. It's really weird. And here's an interesting little blurb from the article. It says a former IC official, intelligence community official, confirmed to public the existence of Immaculate Constellation. Quote, that program is run out of Secretary of Defense, Office of Secretary of Defense, SecDef. The person said they don't want to acknowledge it's real. The same person warned that simply printing the name Immaculate Constellation could trigger government surveillance under the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act of whoever publishes it. So I guess that's Michael Schellenberger then. They won't comment on it, but talking about it will put you in the danger zone. They enforce the secrecy with a lot of vigor. The whistleblowers report said that, quote, a significant volume of intelligence reports documenting first-hand encounters with unidentified anomalous phenomena or unidentified flying objects by DoD personnel exists within the defense human intelligence databases accessible to the intelligence community. Now, does that mean human intelligence databases is this a group of people who are like entrusted with the knowledge, or are these human intelligence assets that are working on this problem and they have access to the information? I'm confused by the wording here, what that actually means. The OSNI, where was this one? There was a really interesting little aside here where they talked about a specific case.
In I've not obviously read behind this paywall, but the specific case you're talking about might be an F-16 being escorted out of mission parameters by a bunch of orbs.
That's it. Right. Let's see if I can do it this way. There we go.
It's also worth pointing out, the name Immaculate Constellation, obviously I drew the conclusion immediately that it was in relation to Immaculate Conception, which is the term that's used for Mary becoming pregnant without, doing the do. And that's what the Bible refers to as Immaculate Conception. But Jeremy Corbell has a documentary called Immaculate Deception.
Yes, which is based on a statement that John Lear made.
Right.
Yes.
And apparently that documentary came out before this program was started, in the wake of the 2017 New York Times article.
When there was also a corresponding spike in Google searches for that term, Immaculate Constellation. And so the question is, it sounds like you're kind of asking, how far back does this information go, right?
Not just that, but obviously, for me, it feels like that name comes from somewhere. So it's either related to a biblical reference, and I refuse to believe it's just coincidence. I don't think they put into a random name generator and it came out with Immaculate Constellation. I think it's either a reference to the Bible, or it's a reference to Corbell's documentary.
My understanding, and I cannot recall where I read this, but it made a lot of sense. It was Immaculate Constellation is just a fancy way of saying clean sky. It's a way of like clean, all of the information that. So basically, the gist is that they do record. People say, "Well, where's all the evidence? If we have all these satellites and all of this military surveillance apparatus and intelligence satellites and all these ships flying around, we've got all this stuff, right?" We should be seeing them all the time. Chris Mellon talks about this. He says, we have satellites in orbit that can look down and read the time off your watch. Like they should, if that's true, which it is, we would have footage of all of these craft doing all of the things that they supposedly are doing, because they have this full visibility. And so all of that information gets collected, collated, I guess removed. This was coming from George Knapp on Weaponized. He said that they basically scrape the cream off the top, and that is what goes to Immaculate Constellation. So it reminded me of cases where there are many reported instances of stuff happening in the past where some guys will show up and they'll, like, wasn't it the Tic Tac case where a bunch of guys showed up on the ship? They came in a helicopter.
They told them to shut up about it.
And they just took all the, all the recordings, they take all the data tapes. Men in Black will show up and they'll say, "Oh, we need all your records of this incident," and they just take it. Is that maybe Immaculate Constellation?
Maybe we get Pavel's take on it, because he's just joined us.
Oh, Pavel's here.
Yeah. Do you want to say hi, Pavel?
Hey.
There he is. Hey, man. Welcome back.
Wow. How you doing? How are both of you doing? But, Clint was through a hurricane, so how's the family? How's everyone?
We're good. We're thanks for asking. We're still got a mess to clean up, but a little bit of progress every day. We made it. The house is still standing, so that's good. No complaints.
That's good news.
Yeah.
How are you, Xander? Nice to finally meet you in person.
I'm good. Yeah, no, it's good to meet you finally. We were just talking about the origins of the name Immaculate Constellation, because there are a number of things that it could obviously mean. I was just mentioning the fact that Corbell has a documentary that came out before this project allegedly started, called Immaculate Deception. It's also a biblical reference, and Clint was talking about the actual meaning of the words. So I'm wondering if you've got a take. Obviously, I'm sure you've done one hell of a dive on the name and what it could mean. So we're all ears.
Something really funny happened a few days ago, where on the vetted Discord, a man came on the open mic, and people started like messaging me, and they also told Patrick about it, because this man seemed to be someone who worked on one of the carriers, and he seems legit. I'm still vetting the information, but some of the stuff he told me about is related to Immaculate Constellation, because he told his story about seeing a Tic Tac with other people inside the carrier, and that a person, he didn't name who it was, took the only video that captured the object, like right on the very next day. And I immediately thought about this. I was like, this could be that program, because this encounter happened in 2019. So it was after Immaculate Constellation was created, presumably.
So there was in one of the reports, I think there's a reference to a carrier where everybody on the flight deck sees this orb, and it apparently descends from altitude and hovers, I think, a few hundred meters over the deck. And the added bit of flavor in there is that everybody reported feeling almost hypnotized by it, and to the point, I think they mentioned that the light coming from it was a bit odd as well. Like, it wasn't your standard illumination. It didn't
illuminate the deck or the water.
Yeah.
But it was a lot of light, it didn't. Yeah.
And that people just felt like they were in a trance until it eventually disappeared, I presume.
That was interesting to me.
Matthew Roberts talked about that when I interviewed him. He said that when he was on the Roosevelt, and he said that when they were having these sightings at that time, there was like a weirdness that came over him. Like he couldn't get out of his mind that they were there for him. He's like, these things are here for me. Did you ever hear that?
Yeah, I did.
That comes up a lot. Like there's some kind of a mental. I want to say it's like a psionic weapon or something that they can deploy against people to just put people into like a trance. Abductees report this a lot. They talk about they just sort of driving and then they kind of phase out, and then it's been 4 hours and they're 100 miles away from where they were supposed to be. Are we seeing? Let me go back to this excerpt from the article, because I think this is really interesting too. That we were about to get into it right when you came in. And it is, here we go. I'll just share this. Share, here we go. So it says Immaculate Constellation includes high quality imagery intelligence and measurement and signature intelligence of UAPs. The whistleblowers report adds, quote, the sources of this intelligence are a blend of directed and incidental collection capabilities positioned in low Earth orbit, the upper atmosphere, as well as military and civilian aviation altitudes and maritime environments. So they're pulling the best of the best information from all of these different sources. And what I think, this is interesting, a blend of directed collection capabilities positioned in low Earth orbit, which means they must have dedicated platforms specifically for the purpose of looking for UFOs, UAPs. But then it goes on and it says the report describes various incidents found in the human database. One involved orbs surrounding and forcing an F-22 out of its patrol area. The F-22 broke trajectory and attempted to evade, but was intercepted, get this, and boxed in by approximately 3 to 6 UAPs. Quote, one UAP maneuvered in proximity less. He established a rigid spatial relationship with the F-22, maintaining its exact position and orientation parallel with the F-22's cockpit, despite multiple evasive rolls and maneuvers. Surrounded by the presumed hostile UAPs, the F-22 was forced out of the mission area under the escort of the UAP formation.
You know, I take issue with that because
Really?
yeah, because there seems to be this when Ross spoke to Schellenberger about it, they kept saying that it was like a threat, you know, like hostile. And if you see in nature, this happens quite often with different animals when where they follow you just because they're curious. Like for example, dolphins follow boats often, and they're
Mm.
not uh, aggressive or hostile at all necessarily. And I think that we could be or should be maybe stay open to this other interpretation, not necessarily that they are hostile, because I don't know. To me, most of these orbs that appear and that do follow aircraft, I don't see, honestly, I don't see malintent. I don't see hostility. I do see a lot of curiosity, and I see them being like kind of inquisitive to uh, approach these either the carriers or the nuclear facilities. But I don't know. That's just me. I've never been one to agree with this hostile intent. To be honest with you,
Do you think, Pavel, that, and actually for both of you, do you think that sometimes I get the sense that the reason that all of this conversation is sort of couched in these defense threat terms, sort of they're always talking about a potential threat. The reasoning behind that is because that is what Congress can respond to. Like if it's a threat, then it doesn't look weird when Congress gets involved in a serious way because they can say, well, there's a threat here, we have to deal with it, and they get to look like the hero. Right. So maybe what you're saying is true. There's not an actual threat, but this is the language we have to use to get the people in power to make decisions that are going to push
yeah,
this
I
forward.
think it's unfortunate that that's the case because it
Mm.
is. I see it too. But I think that there's also a possibility that we can also look at this with a certain level of urgency because we don't know what it is, but not necessarily hostile, you know?
Right.
And but yeah, it is something that have no idea what it is, and it is necessary to study from a scientific standpoint and just to know what we're dealing with. But there doesn't need to be that hostile narrative to it. I don't think it's, and I think that people in Congress do feel kind of the same way, but it is different when you talk with intelligence community or military people because they're wired that way. I
They're wired
understand
that way.
that, but Congress people are different. They're more a little bit more like us. They don't see everything as a threat, you know.
I think it just depends on who the congressperson is and what their political situation is. They have to be so careful with how they appear, to their constituents. You don't want to look like you're screaming the sky is falling. You don't want to look freaked out, like you're not in control of the situation. But someone has to let you know the level of seriousness. So I think when they have these briefings and then they come out and they're like, no comment, we feed into that and we make that appear to be much more frantic maybe than it needs to be, because that's just the nature of, I think, the online community wanting to know more. But maybe that's just the language they've got to use. I think Chris Mellon, he's done this a number of times, like at the Soul Foundation when he talked, he spoke in those terms, that this is a defense issue. This is we need to consider it a threat, because if it were, then we've taken the appropriate actions. I can see that there is a logic there from the defense mindset. That makes perfect sense. But then it does seem like especially lately, there is a PR move happening, right? Like if you look at all of the different things that are coming out, there's this undertone. Even Jesse Michaels picks up on it in one of the clips that we're going to look at today from American Alchemy. And it's like it feels like there's something weird under the surface that is kind of like making people nervous, and no one wants to come out and say anything else. It's like you can see the shadow of the shark, but we can't see the shark. And maybe it's not a shark at all, but we just see this big shadow. I noticed it on Lou's interview with Jesse Michaels. That whole interview was a big build up to the last 5 minutes where he makes this
sandbox
statement.
Analogy.
I think the sandbox analogy is the other half of this conversation. I think that's the other side of it. Is like, what are we going to do? We're a threat for sure. But yeah, he says, time is not a luxury. What does he say? Time is not a luxury that we can afford.
Yeah.
Time is not a luxury that we have. We're hearing this again. It's not an accident. Like, he's not like, what I think is interesting is whenever Lou says stuff like this, there's a part of me that wants to take him at face value, because what I see when I just look at him and I see him talking, and we'll come to this in a minute with the clip. He seems very forthright, honest, human, like a regular person. But I can't tell if that's because he's trying to appear that way, or if that's because that's his, that's who he is. And I can't quite get my finger on the weird vibe that I get from this whole conversation. It just feels like there's something else going on behind the scenes that we just don't understand. We just don't know.
Yeah, I don't think we'll ever get like a straight answer where we can read someone from the intelligence community completely. They're trained to deceive. That's what they were trained for. Counterintelligence is essentially creating propaganda to counter intelligence. And I also think that it's important, that sandbox analogy. Did you see my solution to it, to his question on my channel? I guess you haven't had time to watch many different shows.
No, I've been catching up as much as I can between everything else going on. But we pulled that clip, and we could, if you want, we could go to that clip, and then you could lay out your pieces.
Let's do it. I'll get to that clip. Just give me a second.
And by the way, while Xander's finding that, I just want to say, because there's always so much to keep on top of and keep track of, I don't watch everything. So a lot of stuff I don't see until later. But I have to say, Jesse Michaels' channel is growing on me. It's so good. He's got he has this really deft way of navigating these conversations in a very casual, sort of relaxed way, and he gets people to just open up. And I was really, really impressed with this interview. So I would just say to everybody, go watch the full interview, because it's very good. It's worth it.
Yeah, he's got multiple shows that are off the hook, man. It's the level of production is incredible.
So
you can tell this is like his number one focus. Yeah.
This is the clip about the sandbox.
Sniper, I had to shoot that every time.
Where the rock is?
Yeah, way up there. You hit that? Oh yeah, I was shot. Yeah, absolutely, bro.
A common theme here is we keep talking about the term national security.
And I know you're here to interview me, but let me interview you just for a moment, if I may, if you'll indulge me. How do we? This is a sandbox here, right? Let's say there's a technology now. There's a toy that there's 12 kids in the sandbox, but there's only one toy, right? This toy has the ability to let everybody play together and be nice. The problem is human nature is such that most kids, most governments in this case, using it as an analogy, are going to want that toy for themselves. How do we share the toy? How do we use this? Because we know there's countries out there that if they had a certain type of technology, they would probably employ it very quickly to their advantage. And I'm not saying we have never done it, because we have. I mean, we dropped the bomb. We did. We're the only country that's ever dropped a nuke, an atom bomb. And that was us, So we like to say, oh, we're afraid of it. Well, don't look now, but we were the ones who did it. For good or bad or indifferent, right? That's a fact, established fact. So countries will use technology if they feel that they have to in a time of conflict. With this type of technology, if we were to come together and say, look, we really can do better as humanity. We don't have to fight each other, right? Now, this is on the backdrop right now of Hamas and Israel, Ukraine and Russia, right? We have issues in Africa. We have issues right now with China and the South China Sea and Taiwan and the U.S. And the world is on fire. Doesn't matter what side of the argument you're on. I think we can all agree that the world is a very dangerous and violent place right now, right? This technology has the chance to either bring us together or completely rip us apart once and for all. Right? Like there's no coming back. How do you solve that problem?
Pause it right there.
It's a very hard problem to solve.
How do you solve it, Pavel?
He seems so convinced that it's a technology, first of all. What makes him so convinced that it is technology and not something else?
Well, that's the real question, right? Is like, what does he know that he's not telling us? Does he know the answer?
Yeah. And my solution is to, and this is going to sound very Graham Hancock because he said this before. I think that every single person within the sandbox who has power needs to know what multiple ego deaths feel like. Because according to the data and their actions, we're dealing with a lot of people who are not only sociopaths, but also some of them don't really care about humans at all, or the world for that matter. They're
talking about human leaders.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. Those in the sandbox, which are heads of state, heads of the IC, religious leaders, some of them, and they have a very different worldview compared to the regular folk like us. And I think that the fact that they don't see that is what is making this issue so hard to tackle, because they don't want to play along. They don't want to share the toy if there is this proverbial toy that Elizondo is talking about. So my solution, and it is, I got a lot of shit for this, sorry, is multiple ego deaths, essentially. I think they need to know what that feels like. And if they don't experience that, at least they're going to be scared the hell out of it and just leave it all together.
So you're saying you want to get like Netanyahu, Kim Jong-un, Putin, all these guys in a room and say, look, you can have the toy. We'll give you one, whatever it is, but you've got to go do a peyote ceremony. You got to do 200 of those first. You need to really get your mind right.
Or all the psychedelics, because they all have different aspects that they teach you about the human psyche and about the world. And for example, magic mushrooms, they teach you more about how to connect with nature and how to connect with animals. But the high dosage is what makes people have these horror trips and ego deaths, which are, I think everybody should go through ego deaths within their lifetimes at least once.
Can you
Because
describe for
well,
people who aren't familiar
everybo-
with that term?
Just quickly, everybody does at least once.
yeah, yeah,
When you say ego death, describe what that means for people who don't know.
it is a somewhat subjective experience, but I'm telling you from the perspective of someone who was uh, involved in an empirical way and doing psychedelics for over a decade. And for me, an ego death, I've experienced multiple, is it's a time when you are extremely humbled, and you realize you're so into the psychedelic that you consume that you realize how insignificant you really are,
Mm.
and how unimportant the more banal aspects of life really are. You learn how to cherish and how to um, value the aspects that are more fundamental for life and for socializing with either other people or other organisms. That's the way I see it. And there were moments where I felt like I just lost my mind. Uh, I couldn't speak. I couldn't. I didn't know what the hell was going on. I felt like a vegetable, literally. And coming back from that is one of the most rewarding experiences that I've ever had, because then you go like, okay, so now I know how insignificant I can be, and now I have a different outlook on how to value life because I came back from something that I felt like I was lost, that I wasn't going to come back.
Can I ask, or would you get into any detail about what psychedelics you've done or
Yeah.
you have experience
Um,
with?
I've done, I did a lot of LSD, a lot of shrooms, a lot of peyote, and salvia. I did a lot, but those were the main ones. Others were like more experiential, just once, and that's it. That are stronger. One of them didn't hit me. It didn't do anything to me, which was DMT. I smoked DMT and it did nothing. And it was
Nothing.
weird because everybody else was going through it and I felt absolutely nothing. And I just did it
Well,
once.
that's interesting. Which this is a weird segue, but I'm just going to make it real fast since we're on the DMT topic. We teased a documentary that is called The Discovery by a man directed by a guy named Dan Goller. Goller. We're going to be interviewing him on Sunday, and the documentary is really interesting. We watched the trailer for it, and he has a method for shining a diffracted laser onto a surface. And then, according to him, if you smoke DMT, which we're not endorsing or recommending anybody do, but
Nope.
nothing illegal. Where if it's legal where you are, that's your thing. But he says that by doing this and looking at this laser pattern on the wall, you can actually see code, computer code, exactly like in the Matrix. Maybe not the exact characters that are in the Matrix, but very much the same idea. And that this stuff has spatial independence, and that you can move around, you can see it from different angles, and different people can look at it and see the same thing. It's a really interesting segue, but we're going to be doing that on Sunday, and we'll be posting that next week. We might
I
do it
do gotta
live.
add something real quick because I don't want people to think that I am endorsing uh, doing psychedelics in an irresponsible way. Actually, I haven't done any in almost a decade this year. I had a near death experience because I was irresponsible doing those. I think after a decade worth of experiencing with multiple of these substances, what I came up with is that if you're curious about doing psychedelics, you should be at least 25 years old or older because of the brain development. But also, if your family has some kind of history of mental illness, you should be very wary about doing them. They're not for everyone. Definitely not for everyone. and it is a very life-changing experience. So if you are prepared for that, if you're over 25 and you are okay in your life, and you don't have that family history of mental illness, you still have to be weary about doing them because it is not an easy experience to take in.
Well,
So
so to your original point, just to circle back to what you were originally saying about the sandbox, you make a brilliant point. And I had not heard anybody say anything like this. This is the first time I've heard somebody articulate it this way. That experience would give you think that our leaders having that experience would give them the wisdom necessary to wield the kind of power that we're discussing here?
if it's not the wisdom, it will scare them away,
Hmm.
which is also effective in my view. Because yeah, it will give a lot of people the wisdom to change their ways, but it will also traumatize people who can't take it. And I think that sadly, many of these leaders won't be able to take it, if I'm being completely honest with you,
I don't
because
think they could handle their shit. I don't think they could handle their shit at all.
they
I
won't.
think Netanyahu would lose his fucking mind. I think all these guys, because they're so filled with darkness,
And guilt.
and when you're forced to look into I mean, that's really what psychedelics do. You go into the darkest parts of yourself and you see it. You have to confront that whole scene in Empire Strikes Back where Luke goes into the cave and fights Darth Vader and finds out it's him. It's like that. It's the hero's journey. And you have to be so serious about it. And I would go a step further and say, if people are going to take psychedelics, you want to try to, if you're going to do it, and it's legal for you to do it in the context that you're trying to do it, let me just be careful about how I say it. You need a guide that really knows what they're doing.
Yeah.
Don't just go buy some peyote buds and like go back to your apartment and put on They Live. Like, do not do that. You need, like, when I did mine, I prepped for 2 weeks. I should have prepped for longer, but I went on a vegan diet for 2 weeks, no caffeine, no sugar, no anything. You know, you have to purify your mind, your body. Because in this same interview with Jesse Michaels, I was kind of fascinated by how much they touched on the esoteric world and sort of the residue of supernatural energy that can stick to you when you have these types of experiences. Did you find that interesting?
Yeah, of course. And I think that we're going to keep seeing more and more of that as time goes by, especially because of this, the Collins Elite and all this supernatural spiritual component that there seems to be like an uptick on it, especially recently. So I wasn't surprised and I was happy that Jesse did ask about that and that they did talk about that, because the past is also just as interesting to investigate about all of this as what's happening right now, if not more. And it is all connected. It is not just the esoteric or different philosophies about it. It is also religion, ancient scripture, archaeology, all of it. And I like that Jesse, well, he's a historian. He must talk about this always. It's like an itch. I understand that. I have historian friends. I especially liked how they spoke about these societies that were put in place back when rocketry was invented, and how they performed these rituals when they always, uh, that's really
Yeah.
exciting. It's very interesting to me.
It's really interesting, and how they talked about the early NASA program was literally a transplant of Nazi scientists, which we kind of knew from Operation Paperclip, but it's never really been described, especially in American history books, as that, like in such specific terms. But they literally just picked up a bunch of Nazis, pulled them over, and these are Nazis who were deeply steeped in the occult, brought them over and dropped them off in the United States, and then gave them billions of dollars, and we're like, build us a rocket program. And that community was a tight community, and that stuff persists to this day. The stuff with the Zodiac, all the Zodiac signs and all the NASA missions.
Immaculate Constellation.
Immaculate Constellation. And even at the point there's a point in the interview, which we didn't pull this clip, but it's very interesting, where Lou is describing the situation vis-a-vis science versus religion. And he draws a pyramid and uses that as his teaching tool. And he goes, at the base of the pyramid, if you're standing on the side, if one side is science and the other side of the pyramid is religion or spirituality. If you're standing on the science side and you're looking up at the top of the pyramid, you don't know that there's another side of this pyramid that's all spirituality and esoteric wisdom. But when you're at the top of the pyramid looking down, those 2 points come together and they become the same thing. And you realize, like, oh, we are describing the same thing with completely different language and tools and techniques. And he spends a fair amount of that interview sort of teeing up this idea that science and religion are going to merge in a way that we can't really get away from. And that's going to piss off Neil deGrasse Tyson to no end.
Not just him, Richard Dawkins too.
And Richard Dawkins too.
Yeah.
Can Xander, can you finish that the clip that we had just played? I think we were about 3 minutes into it. Can we finish that clip? Should go for like another minute or two.
Yep, 2 seconds.
He goes on with this sandbox analogy, and it's really interesting how this pans out.
Yeah.
But
it's only the hardest problem
I'll
to ever.
rewind.
Completely rip us apart once and for all, right? Like there's no coming back. How do you solve that problem?
it's a very hard problem to solve, but
It's only the hardest problem to ever.
you have to raise people's consciousness in step with slow dissemination of the thing or something. But
How do you stop that temptation? Because all it takes is one selfish kid to ruin it for the rest.
I have to pause very quickly. I've got a view of everybody's cameras down the bottom, and you guys can't see it, but I've just seen Pavel pointing at his screen frantically because this is literally in lockstep with what Pavel's been saying. So anyway, I'll continue to play.
Remember, one kid. No, it's my toy.
Probably just show them the good ways in which this technology could be used before you even just tell them that it exists.
Who does that? Who's going to take the moral high road and say, I give to you this technology and you shall use it for peaceful means? Who has that moral authority? Who's trusted enough in the world to do that and to say, you will use it for this but not for that? Who?
I think it's probably going to be just a collective move and something that is like an emergent property of a lot of good people with good minds and good hearts coming together to.
Who is that? The United Nations?
I think it's
Is it society writ large?
Well, this maybe the NHI, maybe the entities themselves. I mean, we were with James Fox the other week in Austin, great guy, and I was talking to him, and he was like, I'm making all these documentaries, and the thing that has come up after decades of doing research on the UFO subject, whenever I'm about to find smoking gun proof of UFOs, I have, a video here, a picture here, an amazing eyewitness, the thing disappears. There's some like ephemeral, bizarre thing about that. And then we're talking about the nuclear connection as well, it's almost like there is counter intel on the part of the NHI themselves, where it's like mass surveillance, and it is there right when it needs to be there, and things will disappear, and it's our most precious assets, it's our nuclear assets. They'll get by our most intense encryption from the NSA. And so my answer to that would be like, it's like the 3-body problem. They know we're going to blow ourselves up, so they clamp down on the science, and they're responsible for a lot of the productive science.
Would humanity be okay?
Oh, he finished what he
with
says
an
next.
overlord, an NHI babysitter? Is
Right.
that freedom? Are you really free then if an NHI were to come down and say, okay, folks, this is a reality. Ha, ha, ha. We've been kind of playing with you a little bit, but here's reality. You're all going to play well with each other. You're all going to be able to enjoy this free energy and whatnot. But you're going to play by our rules. Now what happens? Now what happens to free will? At that point, humanity is faced with the reality, potentially, that we're not the alpha species, right? And now that we have to do what something or someone else tells us to do. Is that free manifestation? Is that the ability for us to live our lives the way we want to live our lives, or the way we are told to live our lives?
But isn't that already happening in some version of reality, with people believing that
We can stop
end
it there.
of the world
That's
is
good. I think that's a
Man.
really interesting point that he brings up about counterintelligence from the NHI. And I want to point out that this is something we've heard about a lot forever. This is like as old as ufology. There's been discussion about NHI beings that look like us, that talk like us, that are identical to humans or very difficult to tell us apart, that have some form of influence over us in the mental environment. They can operate in the mental environment in a way that we don't fully understand. They can make us see things, hear things, think things that we think are our own thoughts, but are not. And this has been reported numerous times. Is the secrecy, is it possible that the overwhelming, ridiculous amount of secrecy behind this whole thing has something to do with us trying to keep what we know hidden from the NHI? Do you think that's a reasonable position?
I've thought about this many times. This whole conundrum with the anti-gravity discovery or the lack thereof, that's been debatable for decades now. It always makes me think, what if we are like just signaling like this, you, I, Christian, Patrick, like, is anti-gravity real? Did we crack it? And what if the powers that be that did crack it are like, shut up. We're trying to keep this quiet from them. Shut up. I keep thinking about that.
Let's just go out on a limb. Let's go there just for fun. I'm not saying this is what's happening, but let's just pretend for a second. Maybe there is something coming. Maybe let's just go there. It is some kind of imminent invasion. Maybe they're just going to show up. Maybe it's not an invasion, but they show up and they're like, we're in charge now. And it would be the same as if like you're in your house in your living room and like somebody just shows up and stands at the door and they're armed with a rifle and they just stand there and they're like not doing anything, but they're just watching your family eat dinner and they're like, don't worry, we're not a threat. You're going to feel like there's a threat there. It's going to be weird to you. So if there is something coming and it is imminent, what if deep down inside the bowels of our military defense establishment, we've been trying to figure out, how do we repel this? How do we deal with it? How can we deal with these beings on their own terms so that we can like have some of the technology to go toe to toe with them if we have to? Forget all these people who are like, oh, they're like gods that we couldn't deal with. Forget that for a second. Let's just say that maybe they're not as powerful as we think they are, or they would like us to think they are. Maybe there are things that we can do. And our apparatus is trying to figure out like how to prepare. And that's really what the secrecy is about. Lou said something along those lines in a previous interview. He said, what if there's a situation where if you take action now, you let them know that you know, and then they are forced to make a decision before you're ready. And you have to like react to them. I know I know people are uncomfortable with this threat idea, but like I think it's important that we at least kick it around, right? Kick the tires.
The fact that Schellenberger already talked about alien reproduction vehicles on his article,
right.
That is also very telling already, because this term has been around for a while now.
He also mentioned on the Rogan podcast that the whistleblower told him that we have mastered gravity.
And if that happened in the 50s, let's assume, that means we've had this technology and have been developing it for 80 years, 70 plus years. And what have we been doing with that? How far along are we? But also, again, if these NHI are real and they're like thousands of years ahead of us, we still haven't reached that level in just 70 years. So yeah, it's a scary thought if you ask me. But if it's, I guess it could be possible. I don't know. What do you think?
Let's go down the list of claims that we've heard in the past. Right now, these are claims. I can't verify any. Like none of us really have the answers. But this is just what we know. I know that David Jacobs has interviewed hundreds of and regressed hundreds of abductees and contactees. He's written a number of books about this. I have 3 of them. The Threat, Walking Among Us, and whatever the other one is over there. In those books, he says that again and again and again, so often that it became boring. He said it happened so many times that it got boring. Abductees would tell him, there's something that's going to happen, and they've given me a job to do. I have a job, and I don't know what it is. I can't remember it, but I have this job, and they've told me that when this thing happens, you're going to know what to do. You'll just snap on like a sleeper agent, and you'll just go do the thing. Again and again and again and again and again and again, this claim comes up. Bud Hopkins, same thing. John Mack, same thing. You can read any of their books. They all say this. Abductees, I've been taken. I was on board the craft. Yada, yada, yada. I have a job to do. Then they, in David Jacobs' book, The Threat, they also talk about being shown a gigantic screen. And on this screen, like a movie screen, they're looking at it. They're seeing people in the park throwing a Frisbee, having a barbecue, little kids playing, like that scene in Terminator 2 where Sarah Connor's having the dream and she sees the nuclear attack. But it's like that kind of a scene. And the NHI asked them, can you tell the difference between you and us? And the people say, no, I don't see a difference. Oh, isn't that great? You can't tell the difference. Soon we'll all be together. Everything's going to be fine. We're all going to be together. And this is a very specific quote. Everyone will know their place. That's a very specific quote. Okay, so you've got these reports. We have a conversation with John Lear, which I'll have to find and pull up, but it's with George Knapp. It's on the George Knapp interview series that he did with John Lear back in the late 80s. John Lear talks about a program. He says immaculate deception. He uses those words. And he says that the immaculate deception, or the deception, is that we made a deal with the ETs or with the NHI, and they turned on us. They reneged on their end of the deal. Supposedly, and this is just a rumor, that deal had something to do with the number of people they were allowed to take and abduct. And it turns out, like we said, you could take 100 people a year, but they wound up taking like 100,000 or some, I don't know the exact numbers, but it's a lot more than we were told. That has something to do with it. You hear John Ramirez saying 2027, something is supposed to happen. Lou Elizondo every other week now is going out and he's dropping clues. He's, the name of the book, Time is Not a Luxury That We Have, over and over again, comparing it to 9/11, comparing it to Pearl Harbor. After a certain number of exposures to this kind of information, one has to conclude that there is obviously something that's scaring the shit out of these people. And they are ready to, they think it's worth it to come forward now and start talking about it in a very open way. So I'm just asking the question, I know I'm uncomfortable with the idea of it being a threat. I'm uncomfortable with that idea. But it does seem that if you look at the picture, for the Magic Eye poster, and you step far enough back from it and you look at it, these people are all describing basically some kind of covert operation to maintain or take control of our society in some kind of weird way using this technology. Ingo Swann talked about it. Robert Bigelow talked about an event. I have it. Xander pulled up the Robert Bigelow quote, and we should probably look at the Lou Elizondo quote first, where he says the time is not a luxury. Do you have that clip pulled up?
I do, yeah. Just give me a second.
And then we'll go to Robert Bigelow after this.
That quote was the reason I chose to give my solution. I'll explain after the clips.
There's no way around it. There's no shortcut.
Wow. The word imminent, you write, actually in the foreword of the book, you say, this is not meant that there's, some sort of imminent threat necessarily. But I'm not gonna lie, when I spend time with you, we've spent a decent amount of time together, I get the sense that you're sitting on things that feel like very hard truths. It feels like your existence, like you want to say more, and you feel like you are you're holding it together, and that's a tough spot to be in. And so, to the extent you can talk about what might be imminent, what is imminent?
Time is not a luxury. that we can afford.
Awkward pause.
We the time has come. We need to start having the conversation collectively. We should have had it a while ago, but we really need to. We really need to start having the conversation.
So, Bigelow next.
Let's go to Bigelow. Now, I'm going to set this Bigelow clip up real quick. This is Robert Bigelow, a.k.a. Schmigelow. Those T-shirts are coming, by the way. We have the design. I just haven't gotten it in the store yet. On the Jeffrey Mishlove YouTube channel, New Thinking Aloud, Jeffrey Mishlove has a fantastic channel. Everyone should be subscribed to it. If you're not already, go there, subscribe. It's called New Thinking.
He's a legend. He's a legend.
Fucking legend. He's unbelievable. In this interview, what Bigelow is talking about is the possibility of an extinction level event, a human extinction level event happening soon. Now, Bigelow specifically worked with a team of remote viewers to try and figure out some stuff that was going to happen in the near future, the next few years, not 25 years from now, like more like 5 or 10. Listen to this clip. This is what he's talking about. Listen to what he has to say.
I think I have it queued from the right place, but let me know if not.
By comparison, but so I think that, and I respect SETI's effort because you have to try. I was approached one time to supply funding for that, and I turned it down. And I respect Paul Allen for helping, and the VLA, the very large array that was put up, and that those efforts, those are commendable efforts to at least try, right? And I think the wow figure is in the artificiality of string theory as the big wow, not the signal that they got to me.
You view the universe as infinite, and I would have to think that you probably also view what you've called the God force as infinite. And if I could take it a step further, would you say that we partake of that same infinity within ourselves?
So the biggest grunt starting this path, going down this path, is that having to come to grips that you're going to survive your container, like we keep saying. That is like 95% of the grunt of getting to an open door is just coming to grips with that, having to get enough evidence that's not faith-based. You know, you can have more faith if you have more evidence of it, right? What's wrong with that? What's wrong with that? You weren't created with the capacities that you have to prevent you from speculating on all kinds of things, wanting to have more evidence, not taking things on just pure conversation or some kind of historic record that could be or not be in doubt, or to question that you have the ability to create medicines and to help your
where are we at in the
survive.
center? I think it's supposed to be right around 31 minutes.
31. Okay.
Try 31.
Because I already have a belief system.
Okay.
But I did it to see what kind of proof and evidence would be acquired. And so the challenge is of a different order of magnitude.
Here we go.
The challenge is an effort to involve an acquisition of information from the other side that proves or disproves what information Bix already has from multiple kinds of sources as to the disposition of the human race in time coming. It's a pessimistic view that we have relative to the data that are telling us what we see. I'm hoping we're wrong, and but I'm hoping that the data are substantial in the way that we're trying to acquire it to tell us we're wrong. Because we're going to do devil's advocacy on the data that's coming from the sources that we are out there trying to gather.
If I understand what you're saying, it's basically like the data that is coming into you from multiple sources leads you to have a pessimistic outlook on the future of humanity.
Yeah.
And you're looking for some way that we might be able to change that apparent destiny.
I don't think that's an achievable goal for me.
You could stop there.
I think
Daz Smith talked about, remote viewer Daz Smith talked about, they were looking into the near future to try to remote view some medical technology over the next decade. And there was a barrier that they couldn't see beyond. There was some kind of a barrier. These are all military grade, highly trained remote viewers. They couldn't go past this barrier. Here you have Robert Bigelow saying there's some kind of, we're not optimistic. We have a very pessimistic view about the near-term future of humanity. Lou Elizondo, time is not a luxury that we can afford. We need to start having the conversation now. We should have had it a long time ago. I mean, at some point you smell the smoke, you see the fire, you have to look around, you have to go, okay, well, is this house on fire? Is that what's going on here? Or are these people just saying completely disconnected things that have nothing to do with this? What do you make of that, Pavel? What's your take? You're muted.
I just spoke to Professor Stephen Brown. I am going to release the interview later today, and we kind of spoke about this because he told me his views on the time travel hypothesis and precognition, which has to do with this. And he seems to think that time travel doesn't work like you can go back to the past and fix something that will affect your own future in the same timeline. He seems to think that there are multiple timelines and they all affect each other in some way when they meet. And I think that, yes, they are looking at some of these timelines that are not so awesome, but I think that we can remain optimistic because I think that free will still exists. And I think that we still have the capability to change whatever is going to happen in the future. Despite
But with free will, that's a great point. But we don't have all of the information. So we're kind of, don't you feel like our free will is stunted in a way? We don't know what we don't know. So how can we make the decision?
That's one of the reasons I offered my solution, because Lou says that we don't have time, and I agree with them, but we don't have time to get people training in Buddhism and meditation, which should be one of the most effective ways to change one's perspective on life and outlook, especially in world leaders. That takes decades. We don't have that time.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't feel like it.
Wow. So you're saying like a Manhattan project of psychedelics, like a psychedelic Manhattan, to get all these people into some kind of like.
Yeah, because we don't have time. And I would encourage all people who think this way, who are like, disregard human life or life in general, to go through this. The example that I used in my video is, it has to be a traumatic experience, right? And in history, what has happened to populations who have gone through traumatic experiences? What happened with Japan? That's the best example possible. After Hiroshima and Nagasaki, they went through arguably the most incredible technological and philosophical advancement of the 20th century. It took them like 30 or 40 years to get to like way ahead of the rest of humanity at a certain point. And I think that that is necessary for all of the world and all of humanity. But the fact that psychedelics were stigmatized so hard in the late 60s, coincidentally, in the same way or in similar ways as the UFO phenomenon was stigmatized
By the same
um,
people.
by the same people. I think that that's
There are those famous experiments where they, and people can go on YouTube and look this up, where they gave LSD to infantrymen. And they did experiments where they would basically had these infantry guys go through exercises and training, and they literally just thought war was ridiculous. They thought it was
stupid.
the dumbest thing ever. They just decided, these are all like hard charging army infantry guys. And they're just like, why would we do this?
yeah.
Why would I go get shot and go shoot other people? This makes no sense. Why don't you guys go, you know? But I feel like the obvious question there is that it's unlikely that anybody would agree to that. I don't think you're going to get these world leaders to do it.
Yeah. One can only dream, right?
One can only dream.
If you don't mind me interjecting here, I have one more video that I'd like to show that plays into what Lou has said in the Jesse Michaels interview. And I think it's relevant because it's Danny Sheehan, and Danny Sheehan is representing Lou. So it's safe to assume, as his lawyer, they are privy to effectively the same knowledge.
Wait,
Pavel, go ahead. Yeah.
he's not representing Lou anymore. You did know that, right? It's fairly recent. But
fairly recent, okay.
yeah.
But he has represented Lou, David Grush, and John Mack at different times.
Yeah. And the Disclosure Project too. Not Stephen Greer.
Yeah.
Not Greer
as
per
far
se,
as I'm
but
aware,
his company.
as far as I'm aware, Danny is the chief counsel for the New Paradigm Institute.
Yeah.
And I don't know the technicalities around it, but what I'm getting at is it's safe to assume that knowledge has been shared between those two. And I don't know if you've seen, Danny Sheehan gave a lecture at Yale 11 days ago. Did you see this?
No. I
No,
was
'cause-
invited to attend that, and I couldn't
Really?
make it. Yeah,
Oh, wow.
yeah. Couldn't go.
I want to play a clip that I think potentially plays into this imminent thought that Lou was getting into. So just bear with me a second.
Not only the issue of UFOs, but the issue of the potential thermonuclear war and the issue of global climate change. You've got to come to grips with all three of these things because your world is getting set to change right out from under you, okay? And you don't know it yet. So that those of you who get out ahead of the power curve and start dealing with this right now are going to be the ones that are the go-to people when the roof starts falling in on this issue. And you're going to be the one that people say, oh, I know a friend who's been talking about this. I know a person who's been trying to get courses taught at the university about this. Okay, that you want to start reaching out to help our fellow human beings prepare for this, because this is going to have huge repercussions on the geopolitical structures of our planet, the economy of our planet, the religious institutions of our planet, the domestic political institutions that we have. We have to work together to be able to maintain as much agency, as much sovereignty as we can possibly legitimately maintain in the face of the revelation of the existence of this extraterrestrial civilization. You know, the fact of the matter is they seem to be preparing now to potentially intervene directly to stop the thermonuclear war and to stop the total devastation of our ecological systems on our planet. Okay, and that.
Oh, wow.
Did that not resonate with what Lou has just said?
Yeah.
I think they're all talking about the same thing.
Such an idealistic view from Danny, right? Because I think it's positive from him to think this way, that they are going to intervene and they're going to help us. I hope so.
I think people are about to get fucking rocked. I think it's going to, I mean, for lack of a better way to say it.
That's such a Clint way of putting it as well.
I think this is going to literally, like, it's going to rock your fucking world in a way that people can't even begin to imagine. What we're talking about, I mean, if we take Danny at his word, and I do, he's an honest man. He's a cool guy. He's like a cool, like, grandpa guy. Like, he's a family man. He's saying in that clip, a civilization, not just a ship, not an orb, not a light in the sky. A civilization is going to make contact. They're going to intervene. You have Lou saying, we don't have time. We need to have the conversation. Danny comes in and he says the other half of that. What's the conversation about? It's about agency. It's about what we take with us. It's about leaving things behind. It's about you're going to have to get your shit together and evolve or perish.
Just to give a little bit of context around that speech that he gave at Yale, and Danny has said some bold stuff in the past, but that, and I encourage everybody to watch it. We'll post the link to the full clip. I think it's about 45 minutes long, the lecture, and I think there's a question period at the end. He goes deep, and he makes some statements, and I've actually made a bit of a summary of the statements that he made.
Let's do it, please.
Okay, so, and we'll get back to the imminent, let's call it, nuclear war, thermonuclear war, that he's talking about in that clip that I showed you. But to summarize, and it's quite hard to hear Danny say this because I have a lot of stock in what he says. So he said, in a factual way, there are five, at least, that the government, sorry, I'm going to try and be specific, the US government knows of at least 5 species visiting the planet. They consist of, and this is all in the clip, this isn't me, this is all in the 45-minute Yale talk. There are the small greys, the tall greys, the reptilians, the mantids, which he says they appear to be in charge. And he doesn't say the 5th, but I'm going to assume it's the Nordics.
Nords.
So they're the species he talks about. He also says the Nimitz carrier strike group was off the coast of, you remember the whole Nimitz off the coast of California? He said they were there specifically to monitor an undersea base near Baja. He says that, contrary to what Greer has said in the past, he said abductions are real. And he says aliens have been interviewed at S4, coordinated by Lockheed, and that ETs are concerned about nuclear war. That's what they've said in interviews at S4. This is what I've gathered from, this is what I understood from that New Paradigm Institute video. And we will obviously share it everywhere because I can't believe it's not been talked about more. And I think there were only about 50 people in the auditorium when he said all this.
I can't believe it was
and
that
yeah, then
small
he goes
crowd.
on. Then he goes on to talk about they appear to be preparing to intervene in nuclear war, which I always immediately connected to Lou talking about time not being a luxury that we can afford. And also, interestingly, just as a side note, Danny also still endorsed CE5 in this talk. He did talk very briefly about CE5, but he talked about telepathic communication being very important. And as I said, Danny was Lou's attorney. They have shared information. Make of it what you will. I just wanted to put that out there. Pavel, Clint, go ahead.
There are some definite World War III vibes coming out of the Middle East right now, and I am terrified that Israel is going to fuck this up for all of us, and they are going to launch an attack on Iran, and I think that could cascade into a series of complete and total fuck-ups that is just going to spiral out of control very, very quickly. I'm definitely concerned about that. It's in fact, fuck. If Danny's saying that, I'm not trying to like get people to panic, but if Danny says something, you can take that to the bank. That's how I feel. That's my personal opinion. So if that's what Danny's saying, if there was something that happened in the future that a remote viewer couldn't see past, it would be a nuclear war, wouldn't it? It would be an event that wipes out all life. You wouldn't be able to see past that.
Bear in mind, Lou was part of Project Stargate, or at least not officially, but you know, he has a flavor for it. He was introduced to the key people involved. He knows about remote viewing. He's taken part in remote viewing experiments with the prisoner in Guantanamo. I don't know if he's done more. In fact, I would be willing to bet he has done more, but
of course.
It starts to make a lot more sense very quickly after
then you have to
watching
go
the Danny Sheehan.
Yeah, you have to ask yourself, what is the form of intervention? Like, what form does that take?
If you're asking me, I think it's you know, hold us down and say, guys, no, that's it. You've gone too far. Like, by all accounts, and again, this was mentioned. Sorry. I'll come back on camera for a moment. It was also mentioned in Sheehan's lecture that, by all accounts, our planet is a rare situation. They're not prepared to let us, for lack of a better word, fuck it up. You know, I think
so. In other words, the planet is what they're concerned about, not necessarily us. We just happen to be here, and
it was more about the planet becoming uninhabitable rather than the extinction of the human race. It was more about, you know, this planet, despite the copious amounts of planets that exist within the galaxy and you know, the observable universe, a planet that is equipped to harbor intelligent life is a relatively rare thing, and it should not be screwed up by technically a bunch of apes that have just found their dad's gun.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Lou asks who has that moral high ground to give us the toy. I stand by my solution. Sacred plants have that moral high ground. I stand
Maybe
by
we
it.
give it to the indigenous people. We give it to them first.
Yeah, they've been ethnically cleansed for generations. The few that are left, maybe. I don't know.
Do you
if they
create
have,
like a council of indigenous elders and leaders who are put in charge of thinking about how to use this for the benefit of life?
Yeah, I'm
What about
guessing
something like that?
that many of the religious powers would have something to say about that because they feel like they're entitled to have that seat at the table that actually the indigenous elders would be more suited for, you know. They've taken that role over millennia and done a terrible job at it, by the way. And I think that's one of the major issues with this, the elders from indigenous cultures, that the religions, the organized religions, heads would have something to say about that. They would feel entitled, and they shouldn't because they've fucked it up for everyone for many centuries. That's my view, at least the way I see it. I am not against religion itself. I think that devotion for a higher purpose or a higher being is very productive for people, and spirituality too. But organized religions are essentially the origin of all of these issues that we're going through right now.
It's a control tool. It's a control mechanism, right? I mean, they all are. That's the big thing. I mean, think about all of the spiritual leaders, the best spiritual leaders throughout all of human history. What do they all say? They all say the same thing. Go away from people, find a cave, get as far away from people as you can, by yourself, go into a quiet place. That's where you're going to find the answers. It's inside you. You have the contact. Like, it's there. You can just access this. You don't need an intermediary. Lou even says that in the interview. He's like, that's what he would teach STEM students right now. He's like, you have to go internal. You have to go inside. That's where you're going to find it. And that's to your point, I think, Pavel, right? Like, that's what psychedelics do. They show you a mirror and they show you what you need to see.
Yeah.
But how do you feel about this notion that maybe there is an imminent threat, but it's not, let's say it's not NHI, but it's us. But the bigger point being there's a ticking time clock attached to this.
I mean, I think we're heading towards that either way. And I like this idea of the Deus ex machina moment that we all hope for, that it happens, but I don't know if it will though. There are many obstacles that prevent it from happening. And there's a lot of information, you said it yourself, that we are not privy to. And as long as that remains the case, we won't have a full picture of what's happening and what could happen. So I think that's even worse because it's so much uncertainty surrounding this. We can speculate as we have done here for a little bit, but that's what I'm trying to do. That's what you're trying to do. We're trying to dig. We're trying to speak to people who would maybe slip when they're talking to us and come out with something that we can build on and keep digging. But I think that one of the major issues, and again, I spoke to Professor Brown, and I'm going to tell you something that I spoke with him about. He has this initiative called the Visible College, which is something new. It's formed by academics and people within science who are trying to be open about studying all of this. And I talked to him about this, that the Invisible College, maybe it was very effective when Dr. J. Allen Hynek and Dr. Jacques Vallée created it, continued it. But with the internet and how pressing everything feels right now, I don't think doing this behind closed doors is effective anymore. It should be out in the open so we know what's going on. And I think that partly a lot of this secrecy is because of all of these scientists who have been studying this for decades and have been very secretive about it. They need to be more open too. It's not just the government or the IC or the military. There's also a lot of scientists who don't want to talk about a lot of this stuff. And they need to. They have a responsibility to do it.
But we can't even deal with the threats that we know are real threats. Like climate change is a real threat. We have tons of data to support it. We know how it works. We understand it. And yet we can't even convince people that it's real. Like, you know, but then again, free energy would be the thing that would cure that problem. Like that's the cure for the problem. So how do you parse that? How do you square that?
Yeah. And that that is counterintelligence in action. The fact that a lot of people still think that the earth is flat or that climate change is not real or many more things that we can go into. That is part of counterintelligence, which is very real. Bots are very real. And it is because the internet is such a double-edged sword.
They like to poison the conversation. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's been happening forever since the internet was created, basically.
But that's what's so interesting. If you go to the source, right, and you listen to what Xander's saying, you listen to Danny directly. There's a guy who has firsthand knowledge. He's seen the classified sections of Project Blue Book. He's talked to these people. There's officially, you know, he's probably unofficially, he's probably talked to so many more people than we know. I mean, think about the circles that this guy is in. And here he says, this civilization may reveal itself. So, like, let's game that out. Let's say we just continue on the path that we're on. I mean, every day I wake up and I check the news and I'm waiting for the day I wake up and it's like Israel launches an attack on Iran. There's a nuclear incident. Something happens. And then we're in World War III. And I'm wondering, like, if these ships, let's say they show up, they appear in our skies, they freeze all the nuclear ICBMs in midair. They shoot them down. Whatever they do, they neutralize them. They fall into the sea. And now we've got these ships up there, and neutralized our whole nuclear system all over the planet, and we're on pause now. That's the thing that's going to rock people's worlds. Then you're going to be on your way to work, and you're going to stop your car and get out and look up, and there's going to be a big ship there that's 6 miles across or something.
If you don't mind me interrupting ever so slightly. So Elizondo, way before his book came out, was on Theories of Everything with Kurt Jarmungal. And this was quite a big statement at the time. He talked about the reaction in the first week, which was a fantastic question. I don't know if it was Kurt that had it or one of his viewers, but he said, what happens in the first week after disclosure? And he said, and I'm paraphrasing, he said, there would be an air of somber, that we are not the top of the food chain. And some people took that literally and thought that maybe we were being farmed for meat, which I thought was a bit of a stretch. But the idea that we think we're in control, I mean, we truly do, especially our leaders. We all think that we're in control of everything. And the idea that perhaps we get to that, 5 seconds to midnight and the lights come on and the NHI go, they just say, nope, you've had your chance. The lights are up now. That's it. You've got no more chances to sort yourselves out. We don't want you to die as a species. I think that even for myself, I think that would be quite an ontological shock to have to instantly learn that all of this control we thought we had, and for all of the power that nuclear weaponry seemingly has, yes, absolutely, it can destroy a planet, but it can't destroy much more than a planet right now. And if we can't handle nuclear weaponry and nuclear power and treat it with the respect that it absolutely deserves, how the hell can we be trusted with the power that necessitates, interstellar travel is so far beyond the energy that nuclear power has? How that's the ontological shock, is that really we've just had the stabilizers on the bike the whole time.
So true.
And
You're so right.
when we're 5 seconds to midnight and the lights come on, and then that's it, no more, that's it. You've trusted your leaders. Granted, the vast majority of you are brilliant, honest, hardworking people that just want to love, and unfortunately, you've given the power of planet-destroying power to a very small, select group of people that haven't got the fucking smallest idea how to use it. And I'm sorry to swear, because it is a little bit annoying. Do you know what I mean?
It's super annoying. It makes you want to swear.
Ego deaths for everyone.
Yes, there you go, pal.
You get an ego death. You get an ego death. You get an ego death. I'm Oprah here.
I think to the extent that people individually can explore their consciousness, meditate, find their. I agree with Pavel. Like your overall concept of like a Jedi school, a Jedi academy for human beings. Imagine a school. I've always kind of had this romantic idea of some kind of an academy where if you wanted to create peak humans, like the absolute best of the best humans that are like the maximum of our natural capabilities explored to the fullest, what would that school look like? And what would it teach? And what would it be? And how would you create that? And if you wanted to start it from scratch, could you? And would we pull from these other cultures around the world all of their best ideas and put all that together? Could you build something like that? Or do we have to bring ourselves to the brink? Does someone have to actually push the button and launch a nuclear weapon before they step in? And then when that happens, that's when they appear and they go, okay, well, you failed the test. You push the button.
Yeah. Damn. That's
You know, it's like, how do you, in other words, do we evolve overnight because we're forced to, right? The catastrophic evolution of our species, right? We actually have to come to the brink and do it. You have to play Russian roulette. You have to pull the trigger and it goes click. And then we look up and there's an alien.
I think the closest school there is already is Buddhism. They're the ones that are the closest to what I envision for this to be. But as I told you, there's not enough time to teach people about this and make them be proficient at it. It takes decades.
Do you think it's like a 100th monkey thing where people, if enough people individually seek that enlightenment and at least get on that path, that over time enough people will be resonating at a higher frequency that it flips the rest of us?
That's
because quantum entanglement is real. That's why I think it should work.
One of Greer's theories is that like consciousness is let's call it the human consciousness. There's a tipping point, and it's probably much less than 50%, because it's almost got like a viral nature to it. It only takes a few 100,000 to really, for it to gain steam and momentum. But yeah, no, he's alluded to the idea that if enough people were really thinking about this and taking it seriously, particularly with the CE5 kind of stuff, then yes, we would effectively initiate our own contact, which is, again, granted, is what the New Paradigm Institute has talked about. They also want to develop ways to initiate our own contact should Congress and the Senate fail to act on legislation that's been introduced, which so far obviously they have failed to act, because the recent memo, I think it's called a memo, but it's also legislation, requiring all military to surrender any information, has been delayed until September 2025. And it was supposed to be on Sunday, which coincides with their live stream. Obviously that's not happening, and Danny has expressed his annoyance with that, but I'll be really surprised. But yeah,
I think most people, right? Like this is why I like the skyship. I call it the skyship hypothesis, or like this idea that one day there'll just be a mass contact event. Because I think if average people were exposed to this information, then the average person would choose peace. Most people, I think, would be like, you mean we don't know of an alternative. We haven't been exposed to an alternative. There's a great book by Sebastian Junger called Tribe. He's an anthropologist, and he wrote this book about tribal groups and the way that humans sort of pair off into groups and the way that kind of dictates our culture. And he talked about during the early days of the Americas, the colonies, the European colonies in North America, when people would get separated from colonies, colonists would get either taken by indigenous tribes in the area, or they would get lost and they would get rescued by them. But the people who found themselves in the company of indigenous people, when they were given the option to come back to their European society, they refused. Like overwhelmingly, they refused. They didn't want anything to do with it, because it was so much more egalitarian to live the way the indigenous people lived that they couldn't fathom going back to what they had before. And I wonder to what extent people are just being kept in the dark about what kind of a civilization is possible if we just made some basic changes. And to the extent that Stephen Greer has discussed that in the past, I think he's done a great service to ufology by putting that idea out there, that there is this lost century. We could have this Star Trek level civilization. But how can people choose it if they don't understand that that's a real choice? And if they think this is all there is, then we feel kind of impotent in the face of all this, right? Like, if you couldn't offer, if you could offer free energy to, if you could go into Gaza right now and say, I'm going to give everyone free energy, would would they use it to kill each other, or would they use it to would they say, okay, well, there's enough to go around for everyone. We can form a peaceful society here. Let's just do that. Can you make war obsolete? Is that even possible?
I think that we're way past that already, because the religious component, specifically in that region, prevents from people to see beyond um, the hate that they have and the resentment that they have. Because, as you well know, kids in Gaza who grow up there, they are educated to hate. And that is a reality. And we would need to change education first and then present them with whatever altering technology that comes forward. But there needs to be a education before that. And
And
yes,
then
I really
who's in
did.
charge of the education? That's a great point. But who's got that authority to come in and say, we know the right way to teach you?
After the ego deaths, the people that have experienced them, those are the ones that should um, enact those schools. Yeah,
I don't know, man. I feel a little
I'm
more
crazy. I know.
pessimistic. I wish
Yeah,
I liked
I've
your
gathered
idea.
that. I've gathered that from multiple streams you've done,
I
and that's why I wanted to talk to you too. Um, it is, yeah, it is pretty overwhelming. I get it, and I've seen you struggle at times thinking about this on your live streams. I
it's tough
think,
because I try to put myself in the position of just a regular everyday person looking at this from the outside in. And I try, even though I'm heavily invested and I'm sort of like bought into the reality of all this, I try to maintain a little bit of skepticism. And it's hard sometimes because you can't, after a while, you just see so many people in high level positions saying similar things that just sort of rhyme and fit together, that you have to ask yourself, like, either this is the most complicated psyop bullshit story ever, or there's like some kind of an imminent situation that's going to really change everything for us. And overwhelmingly deep inside, my preference is for a positive outcome for humanity. I want to live in Star Trek world. That's why when Xander, when you showed that clip and you were talking about the different races, short grays, tall grays, reptilians, Nordics, and mantids, that's Star Wars. That's Star Trek. Like we're already there, right? Like we're right there. But we all still have to get up and go to work and do all the stupid shit that we don't want to do. And I feel like there's got to be, I hope in our lifetime, we see that transition take place where we come out the other side of this and we're on some kind of completely different society that's much more egalitarian. I don't want it to be negative. I just find myself like reading the tea leaves and I'm going, well, this reads overwhelmingly badly for us. I don't know how else to read it.
yeah, I think that it's important to just keep in mind you got kids, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we need to keep an outlook, thinking about them always, and animals too, because we're not going to be around forever if this doesn't hit the proverbial fan early. And if you don't maintain in your actions and in your what you talk about that positive outlook, and your children are looking at you, um, that's information that is getting in their heads. That sense of dread
Mm.
that is not going to be productive for them to enact whatever cards they're dealt with, because they're going to be dealt with cards eventually once your protection uh, recedes a little bit, and they are going to act upon the examples they saw when they were growing up, you know. And I think that, yes, it is very okay to be asking these questions, but the reality is we have no idea what the singularity will bring. Nobody does. Lou has some kind of an idea because he has more information, but
Mm.
at the end of the day, he really doesn't know what is going to happen.
He certainly doesn't know the reaction that the human. Like we're
And I
too
think
unpredictable.
that's staying on this dread state is not productive.
I agree.
I don't disagree with you. I don't disagree with you. You're right. You are right. Like there is it's important to stay positive, to resonate at a higher vibration, to meditate, to try and manifest positive outcomes for the things that you're involved in, and that includes this whole civilization. I look at that as a personal thing that each individual has to do internally, right? You have to kind of face that internally. But separate from that, when you just look at the statements these people are making, I think that's what I'm responding to. I'm just reading the statements and I'm going, well, that sounds dark. And it does.
Yeah.
It's not crazy to say it sounds dark. And it doesn't mean that I want this stuff to happen or that I'm negative. And I'm not saying that's what you're saying. I'm just saying that some people have made that connection. They think because I talk about this a lot, that I think it's all bad, it's all negative. I'm not saying that. I'm saying if you read the statements, if you just read the transcripts of these interviews, if you listen to Danny Sheehan, you listen to what Lou Elizondo just said. I mean, we just played the clip.
I think
if you look at it objectively, what they're saying is dark.
I think the apt word is that it seems like there is a tribulation ahead, and that doesn't necessarily end badly, but that it's not that it's turbulent, at least turbulent, and there's no way around it. It seems like there's a core truth here that is. It doesn't matter how you talk about it, it's gonna be rough. But to just kind of bring it all back around, Corbell talked about this on his podcast, Weaponized. He said there are two ways this can play. Now that the cat's out the bag about Immaculate Constellation, that's not going anywhere. The internet will find a way with that. We will find out so much more about that program over the next month, whether they like it or not. So they get to decide now, before the hearings next month, which way do they want this to go? Do they want to talk about it at least slightly more openly? Or does the Pentagon, precisely the Pentagon, because this is apparently a Pentagon-ran program, do they want to continue to deny it? Because you can deny stuff as long as you want, but by all accounts, and according to Corbell, what he's alluded to in his podcast recently, we will learn more about that program, whether they like it or not. So the choice is theirs. Do we have, let's call it catastrophic disclosure, or do we have a disclosure that makes sense for everybody, that includes everybody, and is a stable transition into the next part of what it means to be a human?
I think that people getting into this topic who are new but have some sort of a presence, like, for example, you, Clint, or Patrick, or Christian, we do have some sort of responsibility to continue the conversation, but try to steer it in a way that is productive for almost everyone. Because, and I say almost because I know there are these sociopaths who are also, and many of them are in control. And I don't think they will be part of whatever future we can try to create. And the reason I created Psicoactivo is because I do think that we do have capabilities that we still don't understand completely. And I do think that they're going to be essential in order to continue building towards a future that we all want. And if we don't realize that, that is going to be the problem. That is what actually makes me wary of the future. The fact that we don't get to see what we can achieve first within us, and then together after we realize what we can do within us, you know?
I think you make an excellent point about, you both make an excellent point about the role of this generation in the future, in the times to come. And I think what it sounds like what you're saying is the role of our generation now. I'm talking about people with kids, like people who, you know, like us, or parents, we're raising the next generation. So we're going to be the ones that have to shoulder whatever's coming. And so the task now is to steel yourself for that, to get mentally prepared, emotionally prepared, meditate, find out who you are, figure your shit out, let go of your bullshit, evolve yourself, and be ready for some wild, amazing things that are going to look like nothing we've ever seen before, so that when that moment does come, we don't lose our heads, and we keep it together, and we're able to help others get through that situation and come out the other side. I think, is that a fair assessment of what you both are saying, more or less?
Yes.
Yeah.
For me, yeah.
I think it's not to say that there's no danger. There probably will be danger. There probably will be threats, but it's not going to necessarily be what we think it could be. It could just be the way this all plays out. If they step in to intervene, and our military interprets that intervention as an attack, they could frame it that way. Now we're off to the races, and we're doing something completely different. If they intervene and they bring the world to a standstill, there's a great book by Arthur C. Clarke everyone should read. It's called Childhood's End. Have you guys ever read Childhood's End?
Never heard of it.
It's literally about this. I'll send you the link if you. Well, I guess I could share it real quick. Childhood's End is about a contact with an extraterrestrial species that basically they become our overlords. They become our babysitters, and we experience decades of a technological utopia here on Earth, and our society transforms. And we eliminate scarcity. We have this like very beautiful egalitarian society, but really at the top of it, we're not in control anymore. And it's about that and that dynamic, how it plays out. And I won't go into too much detail, but this is a great read. And I believe it's one of the books that Lou, I can't prove this, but I believe he's mentioned it in the past. So that's a great one. But yeah, the intervention, if it saves us all from a nuclear annihilation and we just come out the other side and we're no longer in control of the planet, and there's just some other force above us, I guess for the average person down here on the ground, it doesn't really make that much of a difference because it's not like we ever really had that much control.
Yeah, and Americans do have this sort of decades-long philosophy that they acquired through their military culture of, or since 1776 to be more specific, about this freedom that, here in Mexico, we also have a kind of freedom too. But I think a lot of this concept of freedom is an illusion in many ways, because at the end of the day, you still answer to the government. You still have laws. You still, if you want to do something that the government deems illegal, you're still going to jail, you know? And I think that sometimes this term is a little bit overused by Americans specifically. This freedom, I don't know.
There's a great quote, and it's like, I'm trying to remember who said this. It's like people think, it's not about freedom, it's about money. If you think you're free, try going somewhere without any money.
Oh yeah.
And I thought that's really what it's about. It's about money. It's about control. Americans are the most in the dark people probably anywhere. Like, we have been bamboozled and bombarded with psychological manipulation and corporate propaganda for so many years that I don't think this country really knows what the fuck's going on. And I think that continues to this day. And I think that my sense is that the machine has to break. That we have to break. Even in Star Trek, they discuss this, and I'll end it on this. We can kind of wrap on this idea. But they said there's a third world war. It does take, in the Star Trek universe, it takes place, and we wipe out almost everything. We almost don't make it. And then there's a period of chaos afterwards where it's like Mad Max. And then we make contact. The Vulcans make contact with us, and that begins this uncomfortable relationship, which plays out in the series with Scott Bakula, Star Trek Enterprise, if you guys are interested, if anybody cares. Where for the next 100 years, we're trying to find our space legs and understand how do we go out into the galaxy and make contact with other species, and how do we do this? Like, how do we become what we're meant to be? And all of the challenges that come along. But it first has to, the whole thing breaks, and most people don't make it. But who comes out of that because of the horrors of that war? They understand the stakes, and they're able to apply the technology in a way that they just decide we're not going to be violent anymore. We're just not going to do that. We're going to evolve past that. And I always thought that was a beautiful way to sort of imagine what the future could be. We've got to wrap it.
That's why I'm so subscribed to my solution, man. That's a traumatic experience too, what the Star Trek people went through. Why is there a need for so many people to die when we can just do ego deaths and yes, die, but not like physically die and not hurt the planet? But yeah, that's all I wanted to say.
I think you're absolutely right. I love your idea. I think it's the right idea. I think if we could get it to work, if you could find a way to like get these people to do it, that would be it. That'd be the way.
I'm just gonna be as loud as possible.
Yeah.
I hope it works.
This has been a heavy episode. I didn't expect it to get this heavy this fast, but it did get heavy. Thanks for lightening the mood, Pavel. Thanks for coming by. And Xander, always a pleasure. This has been great. Real quick, now we're gonna start to play it out here, but we had a few super chats, and I wanted to bring them up. Somebody had asked earlier, and I can't seem to find it here. Has there been any updates, Pavel, real quick on our way out, on the object? Any recent updates?
Yeah. Okay. So I'm gonna take a moment here because I have been looking into the rumor and these briefings, and I spoke to someone who gave me confirmation that the briefings are happening, but right now the Congress people that are supposedly going to talk to me about it are too focused on the election, and they don't want to talk about that now. But after the election happens, I'm gonna drill them again and possibly get some more information about that. For now, the object remains a rumor for me, and it should for you too. Yeah.
Okay. That was Rinsler 2, or Rinsler asked that question, and then you guys make me say, Toxic Fart wants to know, or wants to say, March 2023, it was in the news that Kirkpatrick and Avi Loeb said there is a mothership at the edge of the solar system. Google it. I don't know if that's what they said. I think it sounds a little extreme. I know that
they framed it as a hypothesis. They didn't say it was real.
One hypothesis, and that was for Muamua, right?
Yeah. They talked about it. Yeah.
Okay. All right, so we're going to end it there. The congressional hearings are going to be coming up in November, and this is something that we're looking forward to. We're going to look to those hearings. We'll probably do some kind of a watch party here. Supposedly, they're going to dig into Immaculate Constellation, and we're going to start to find out what there is to know. So that's it for now. We're going to be back next week. We'll do Members Only Monday on Monday. We'll be back Friday. We've got a bunch of stuff to cover next week. I'm back in the swing of things. Thank you to everyone who joined us in the live stream today. Thanks for being a part of this conversation. I think it's really important that we're all involved and that we all participate as much as possible. Normalize this conversation. Talk to your friends, talk to your family, talk to people about it. It's light. It doesn't have to be heavy. Just put it in their minds. This is real. You guys got to understand something right now. This is the most exciting time to be alive ever. Like, this is the time where the biggest things that we can possibly imagine are actually going to happen. A lot of the science fiction stuff that we grew up on is becoming real. And apparently, the greatest conspiracy theory of all time, the mother of all of them, just so happens to be the one that turns out to be true. So if these people are to be believed, there's some big things coming in the next few years, and it's going to be you guys on the front lines who are going to be facing it, dealing with it, trying to process it. So get your mind right, meditate, figure out who you are, do that spiritual work. It's important. I don't know the right way. Everybody's got their own way. You got to find your path and then get on it and start doing it. It's important. That's it for now. We'll see you here next week. Until then, keep looking up.